So, what's so unusual about an unusual sale? Let's ask Jerry. Hi everybody, welcome to the DCSI Parts Guys. We're presented by Dealership CSI. We're powered by ESPM. And today we're going to talk about the unusual sale. I'm Rick. Here's Jerry. How's it going this morning, Jer?
Hey Rick, how you doing? Things are going real well here. We're going to talk about unusual sales because there's probably very little knowledge about them out there. I'm looking forward to this and sharing some information.
Well, we recently had a chance to do a series of seminars for the Jaguar Land Rover Group and up in Las Vegas, and we appreciate being invited up for that. We met some great people, and one of the parts managers we were talking to asked a question about the unusual sale. And as I was talking a little bit about that, you had mentioned a little known feature of CDK that includes the unusual sale that we're going to talk about in a little while. But before we do that, Jared, let's talk a little bit about what is an unusual sale and why we would ever have to pay attention to that.
Well, Rick, an unusual sale to me is something that we don't really want to record the sales history in our EMS system, whether it be CDK, Reynolds and Reynolds, or DealerTrack, so that it doesn't skew the calculations for best stocking level. So in other words, it might be something where you have a particular customer that is not really buying these parts to be replacement parts, but maybe he's buying them because they're going to do some testing on them. Maybe they're going to export them to a different country. There's quite a few different reasons for an unusual sale. They're not real common, but when they do occur, they can really skew the calculations on the best stocking level. They can also affect phase-in on part numbers. So an unusual sale is a way to go into the system and tell it, hey, I really don't want this to count as far as phase-in and as far as calculations on the best stocking level.
Well, and that's where a lot of people don't even understand that it exists, and so they go through a number of motions. Let's say you're going to do a return. All the systems have a good return program where it'll automatically reduce quantities on hand and create a no history sale. But I've talked to some guys that put them on an invoice and run them through as a receivable, and a lot of times they just charge them out on the invoice. All of a sudden some of these parts phase back in because we just showed a little demand for them. So there's those situations, returning parts, there's write-offs, there's damaged parts, there's even the situation where we have our own product, the Orbit, the obsolescence reduction by inventory transfer process that we make available. We're going to talk about that in another video. But those are all those situations where you need unusual sales. And then, of course, the next question is, how do you post an unusual sale? So we're going to take a look at a couple of examples here. Number one with DealerTrack. DealerTrack at some point never had a way to put the unusual sale in. Recently they've added the unusual sale. So if you're in a parts transaction screen, on a counter ticket, on a repair order, go into your options and you can see there's a U for unusual sale. All we want to do is punch that U in with our quantity, and you can see it changes now. Quantity is going to be as an unusual sale, and that's all there is to it. What happens in Reynolds and Reynolds, Jer?
Well, Rick, Reynolds and Reynolds is the same way. They do call it an unusual sale. And they have the transaction code column. All you have to do there is make sure that in that transaction code column you've put in a U so that it is an unusual sale, and again, doesn't affect the best stocking level calculations, doesn't affect phase in, phase out. The transaction, it reduces the on hand, but just doesn't record a sales demand in the system. So that's how you would do it in Reynolds and Reynolds, and it's just that transaction code has to be a U.
That looks pretty simple. Let's see what happens in CDK. Jer, walk us through this one.
Well, in CDK, Rick, there's different posting codes that can be used, and you'll see here we brought up those different posting codes. So when you're trying to record a unusual sale in CDK, they actually call it a no history sale, which is a pretty accurate description of what it is. You're just taking the history and not using that history. It relieves the on hand, whether you're doing it on a counter ticket or whether you're doing it on a repair order. Anytime you want to do it, you would just put in the quantity, a space, followed by an N for a no history transaction. So that's how it in CDK world.
All right, and that's for a single transaction. So now this is that little known function that you talked about with our parts manager there. Why don't you walk us through that one, Jer?
Well, Rick, I ran into this. There was an update to the CDK system, and I stumbled across one of the launch bulletins or release bulletins, as they call it. And I've got a customer that has numerous stores within their group, and they're all Ford stores, different locations. So this became a very handy tool for us. They have the option where you can actually set up a customer, and everybody's pretty much familiar with setting up a customer on CDK. But there's a CCST function, which is customer customization, which will just customize that particular customer. And you can actually set up a customer number so that every transaction for that customer gets recorded as a no history, because the customer is flagged as a no history customer. So if you're transferring parts between locations, this comes in real handy. Like I said, a couple of my stores, we've got this set up because they transfer parts from one location to the other. Maybe one location's a full dealership and does all the ordering, and then they just transfer inventory over to the other store. So in that CCST, you can go ahead and you can set up that customer, and you just apply that to a certain customer number. So anytime you would then sell parts to that customer through an invoice, it would not record the sales history, and it would not then therefore increase the best stocking level based upon those transactions. It's really effective. Works really good. You can see that on the CCST screen that we have an example for you. You just have to have the customer number at the top, and then down towards the bottom there, you want to change where it says N for no history. You want to change that to a Y. That would set up the customer as a no history customer. And again, whether it's an exporter or whether it's just another location within your group, all the transactions then that get recorded as invoices to that customer number will not affect the sales history and affect the best stocking level calculations.
So this is why we call him Mr. CDK. Jerry's got a lot of good nuggets of information from CDK, and you never know when this kind of stuff comes in handy. Just by chance, we were having that conversation the other day with his parts manager, and it turns out Jerry's been using this with some of his clients, and that's a good way to take control of some of this stuff and of course simplify things. So that's kind of what we're all about with our tips and tricks for professional inventory management. We like to bring things out that isn't much talked about, some information that you can take back to the store and use, and hopefully you get something out of it. So Jer, thank you for joining us today. I appreciate it.
Rick, it was my pleasure, and just a word of warning, don't get carried away setting up everybody as no history. Obviously, you still need valid sales transactions in your system, and as we talked about before, this is a good example to use if you're maybe selling to somebody who's exporting parts somewhere else, or transfers amongst the group. In some stores, yes, they do require you do your returns on an invoice or whatever so that they have a better paper trail. So again, if you're just returning parts to the manufacturer and you have to relieve them through an invoice, that would be another good example of this no history customer setup that you could use. But really enjoyed sharing this stuff with you. Hope you get something out of it and put it to good use.
Well, thank you, Jer, and thanks everybody for joining us. Let's go make some money.